Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind, Season 2. Let's watch.
So I was sexually assaulted when I was 17. Like, my heart is healed. It's just like sometimes my body remembers. I mean, it can be difficult. Like, I'm very, very, very selective on who I allow to get very, very close to me.
Yeah.
Like, I can make...
Okay, so we're learning that Iyanna had gone through a sexual assault when she was 17, and kudos to her for speaking up and speaking for other victims who might need to feel some people step. We live in a world where we shame people for coming forward. We punish them when they come forward. We say that there's something wrong with them. They must have asked for it. Even if we do believe that they were truly victimized, some people will actually consider them to be impure in some ways. It's a really awful situation. And so part of the solution is people stepping forward, like with the Me Too movement, saying this is a thing and it happens and there's nothing to be ashamed of. So Iyanna is doing that right now, and kudos to her. And kudos to Jarette for asking, do you have any traumas? And then she asked, or she answered, she's like, yeah, I actually, and she said something interesting. She said, I've healed in my heart, but my body hasn't healed. Meaning, I think that she has been able to move on emotionally, but sometimes she'll get triggered when people get close to her, or there's a threat, or maybe so we use the show as a jumping off point. A lot of people who have been through, some sort of physical or sexual trauma will have various different after effects. Sometimes full-blown PTSD, sometimes what I would just call trauma reactivity, where if someone reminds you, it's all about triggering, right? So if a smell reminds you, or a person kind of looks like them, or if someone is standing over you, or if you hear a loud noise, or if you're confined, or if someone innocently is having some sexual energy towards you, but it reminds you of what happened, your body will be triggered. Your body senses danger. Your body is saying, the last time this happened, a very, very horrible thing happened. It's probably happening again. Body, have a reaction. It's the same physical reaction as if a tiger is coming to eat us, or we're being pushed over the side of a cliff. Our body has its own mind, if you will. Even if in your head you're on a date and you're like, I can trust this person. I can trust this person. They're not that person that assaulted me before. Don't freak out. Don't freak out. So your mind is, or your prefrontal cortex anyway, is saying everything's gonna be fine, but your body, or maybe the rest of your mind, is not convinced. And so this is where therapy comes in. There are various different trauma therapies. Exposure, prolonged exposure is what I use because I find it to be very flexible, at least my model of using it. There's EMDR, of course, there's CPT. There are a number of different evidence-based approaches to trauma. And with those therapies, they have pretty good rates of positive outcomes and symptom reduction. So if you have something like that, I encourage you to find a specialist in trauma. You have to find, I don't know the percentage, but I would say most therapists either know they don't really understand how to treat trauma, or they don't know that they don't know how to treat trauma, but they think that they do. So you have to sometimes shop around a while before you find someone that actually knows what they're doing. And then you have to find a good fit. It takes a long time, is my point. But anyway, so Iyanna is, she's talking about that. Let's see how this conversation goes.
My time with, and it's not that many people because I'm just very, very selective.
You are one resilient person.
It doesn't feel fresh, but there's still some lingering things that, I don't know, make me, I guess, have reflexes. I mean, I already struggle with trust in general.
Good. So she's able to talk. This show is interesting because with 90 Day Fiancé, they don't have conversations like this. And I'm always wondering, do they have because they should be, imagine Gino and Jasmine having you just can't imagine, or Ed and Liz. And maybe they are, but they're certainly not showing it. This show seems to, because Love is Blind, they can't go on dates. They have to just show them having conversations, and they're going to pull probably the most interesting bits. And anyway, so kudos to the show, I think, for showing these kinds of things. And I want to point out something that with Jarette, he's listening, he's empathetic, He's creating space. He's not making it about him. It's just Iyanna talking, and he's like, wow, you're a really resilient person, and do you have any trauma? Because it's something to think about in terms of, one, how to be a good person, two, how to gauge a good partner, because not all the time, but a green flag, if you will, in dating is if someone genuinely takes interest in you. Or I guess a better way to put it is to look at where they are on the spectrum. Because for some people, they're going to be like Jarette, who is taking a lot of interest. Some people are going to be way over here and never really ask questions of you. And some people might be in the middle. So, and you can gauge for yourself what sort of person you're looking for. But I would recommend at least having that on your list of at least in the middle, because if they're way over here, that could become hurtful moving forward.
I had an issue with someone who I thought was a really close friend of mine. There had been friction between us for quite some time. We had like an issue. I never saw the knife in his hand. I was stabbed.
Ah, so he's talking about his own traumas. He was stabbed about a year ago by someone that he thought was a friend, I think is what he's saying. And he didn't know. His story is that it seemed to come out of nowhere. And yeah, so that's rough. That's really scary.
Oh my God.
And the thing I want to point out, culturally speaking and stereotypes wise, is that not only do we tend to downplay men's emotions, but particularly black men's emotions. We tend to see a black man like Jarette and say, well, he's tough. He's probably been around the block. He'll be fine. And no. Different genders do not have different emotional centers. Different ethnicities do not have different emotional centers. It's just the human emotional center and the human response to trauma. Women do not respond to trauma different than men. Black people do not respond to trauma different than non-black people. So if Iyanna were to be stabbed and attacked, audiences would have a really easy time imagining the trauma, the fear, the lingering effects afterwards, the terror involved, the feeling of helplessness, the fear of dying, the betrayal of your friend stabbing you. But for some reason, when it comes to men, particularly black men, audiences have a really hard time seeing that because we don't depict that. And we also will shame men, and maybe particularly black men, for having vulnerability, for being a wussy or a pussy or a girl or a lady or a Sally or different kinds of insults that I've heard in my life. And so good on him for talking about it. And I don't know, it makes me want to cry just thinking. So I don't know, maybe he'll just be like, yeah, it was scary. It wasn't that big of a deal. Who knows what his real experience was? We don't know. But I'd be surprised if he got out of that experience without some significant psychological trauma from that.
Jesus.
Like, I haven't had anybody there to go through this with.
I'm so sorry you went through that. That's a lot.
And Iyanna has they're both really good listeners. It makes me want to cry just thinking about what they've both been through. The thing I want to also highlight along these lines is among the clients that I've worked with over my 25 years as a therapist, men and particularly black men that I've worked with, not always, of course, but many, the amount of emotion and dependency and sadness and tears that they have built up behind a massive dam of toxic masculinity is almost infinite. I've worked with, and it's not like women are allowed to feel their feelings. We shame everyone for their feelings, but some of the explosiveness of emotion that I will see in men, particularly black men on average, is tremendous. And And I've had to, in my life, remind myself, because one of the issues, so we always use this show as jumping off point. Think about yourself, regardless of your gender. What are your emotions, and do you feel like you can express them? Most people don't. Most people don't feel like they can express them. A lot of people years ago gave up even on recognizing their emotions. We have emotions all the time: sadness, happiness, jealousy, disgust, anger, fear. And so think about for yourself, and if you have a partner, think about for them. Do they... So I'm trying to figure out kind of a metric. And what I would say is, if you are not feeling a significant feeling once or twice a day at least, and expressing it so other people really get it, they're just like, whoa, you're having that feeling, then you're probably suppressing something, is the thing. And most people, anecdotally, I find to be suppressing a lot, because we're really just an incredibly emotion-shaming society. And so I've had to sometimes remind myself, because sometimes I will be tricked into believing that clients truly don't have emotions, or not many emotions. And then I'll continue to go down the road, and eventually, that's right. Like I was seduced by their trickery that they didn't have emotions. And sometimes it's easier as a recipient to just believe that, because it's easier that way for others. If you don't have if you're in a relationship with someone and the person that you're with, they don't have any emotions, it's very convenient for you, because you don't have to do anything. It means that life is very clean, and so it can be inconvenient sometimes if your partner has feelings, has emotions. And so sometimes it's wishful thinking. You just go along with it, because it's like, well, I mean, you don't have any emotions. You don't seem to have any. It's like, it's kind of convenient for me, because I don't have to do anything for you, And so I sometimes have to I'll be reminded by people. So, that's right. Like, everyone has a vast sea of emotions going on, particularly those who have never been allowed to express them.
I think it's you.
Ooh. I've made connections with you and Malory, and it's just like my brain is flustered. Like, I've literally...
All right. So contrast this with Shane. Jarette is like, I'm really connecting with you, and there's someone else, Malory. Because they're bonding, Jarette and Iyanna, and Iyanna is starting to kind of have that language of like, after watching enough of these couples, there's a certain progression to the language that even though they're not directly saying, hey, I think you're the one, there's little, the word connection gets brought up, or, wow, I feel really good with you. I feel like I don't connect like I do with anyone else. I've never felt this way before. These kinds of signals. I don't know if they're signals as much as just expressions, but I think sometimes they are actually purposeful signals to kind of test the waters a little bit, and they could be authentic. Anyway, so Jarette's starting to hear that from Iyanna, and he's like, oh, I should probably tell her, look, I'm also kind of getting serious about someone else, Malory. So contrast that with Shane. With Shane, he was connecting with Natalie in a similar way of this, and then Natalie starts to say, oh, I think you're the one, and then Shane just goes along with it. And then as soon as he has a chance to talk to Shayna, it's like those things never happened. So there's nothing wrong with either Shane or Jarette in this phase of the dating Love is Blind process to say, I'm kind of into two different people here. I don't know what to do, That's okay. But just be honest about it. And what is it about Shane that got in the way of his honesty? And what is it about Jarette that gives him the strength to be authentic and genuine?
Hey, okay.
Yeah, it's my investments.
What do you think that would look like with your husband?
I want to be with somebody who is like a partner and all that, right? We can decide, like, do we want to live in your condo, or do we want to live in my house? Like, or do we want to rent both out and get something else?
Another interesting possibility, of course we couldn't know, is how accent plays a role in Love Is Blind, because there are slight differences in accent, and whether or not they're accurately perceived or not, or consciously perceived or not, that would play a role, right? The way, the sort of word choices, because in our culture in the United States, class is very much identified by the way that you talk. Like the way that I talk, I come from Seattle. I have an education. I hang out with professors and other kinds of therapists. And, you know, we talk a certain way. And so it comes across, whether I'm doing it on purpose or not. I'm sure there is some purposefulness to it on some level, because whether you like it or not, most people are trying to come across as higher class, or at least of a particular class that they identify with. Or anyway, my point is that in this experiment, there's not a lot, because another way that we gauge class, consciously or unconsciously, is the way we look, is our fashion and that sort of thing. But in this venue, the only way you could register it is based on accent and word choice and the sort of, and I suppose the things that you talk about. Right now, we're hearing Jarette and Malory talk about home ownership and business, and there's certain markers that they are signaling to each other. I don't know exactly what's being signaled. I mean, I would have to be there, but now on the other hand, they're just talking about their life and their job and their career, which is great to have a conversation about that. But I'm not really talking about these two. I'm more just thinking, I wonder how much class was a part of the selection process through voice and accent and word choice.
Else, I do have a dog, so.
What kind of dog you got?
I got a German Shepherd.
I fucking love German Shepherds.
Do you? She's a huge baby. She's like 2.5 years old.
You be snuggling with her?
Oh my God, yeah. She's very cuddly.
I mean, I can see why multiple women like Jarette, because he is a very, very good listener. I mean, he's locked in on what they're saying. He's genuinely responding. It doesn't seem to be a put on, like, okay, now I have to empathize. I will, he seems like he's really interested in them and their life. She's talking about her dog, and you just feel the way he's talking. It's like he's there with her and the dog. You just feel that in his voice.
For this.
Alrighty.
Hey Mel, it's beanchy salsa. I just realized you and I are two peas in a pod.
So as a guitarist, I've tried to play ukulele, and it's not as easy as it looks, at least to me. Ukulele, it looks like a kid's toy, right? But because it's so small, and the strumming, you have to have a very consistent touch, and it's all about rhythm. And anyway, so that's my reaction to that.
Hey, I like my time spent with you the most. Let's go somewhere remote. I hope this makes you smile. The way you make me smile.
And that blanket, I almost bought one of those blankets. It's a cooked tortilla. There's something delightful and disgusting about it at the same time. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.